Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Heather Chavez. Heather is a graduate of the University of Berkeley's English Literature program and has worked as a newspaper reporter, editor, contributor to mystery and television blogs, and in communications. She lives with her family and 2 cat overlords in Santa Rosa, California, where she is at work on her next novel. Her titles include No Bad Deed, Blood Will Tell, and Before She Finds Me. Woo, look at that gorgeous cover. We have a coaster today because we are at the Thriller Fest conference in New York, and we don't haul our own books to conferences because we're going to take a lot of books home that aren't
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, well, welcome, Heather.
Thank you.
Will you tell our listeners about Before She Finds Me?
Sure. It is a kind of cat and mouse thriller told from dual points of view. We have Julia, who's a mom sending her daughter to college, and then we have the pregnant assassin Ren. And there's this horrific attack in the beginning of the book, and it's only Julia's very quick thinking that prevents her daughter from having more significant harm. And so of course then she has to get to the bottom of what happened and why it happened. And at the same time, Ren, her husband, is the one who committed the crime, and which goes against everything that they have established in their professional relationship as well as in their marriage, where he kind of secures the jobs, but she does all the planning. She's very meticulous and she does the planning. And so, but she knew nothing about this attack. So it's kind of like they're both trying to get to the bottom of what it was that happened. Was it random? Who paid him? That kind of thing. And of course it puts them at odds with one another, but also on track to collide.
Yes, exactly. It creates a really good tension in the story. So one of the things that I found really fascinating about this story is the use of plants, right? Mm-hmm. Ren, as an assassin, uses toxins from plants to do her dirty work. But Julia is also a really incredible green thumb, and actually it's her knowledge of plants that gives some really cool clues about what might have happened during the story. And I won't give too much away, but tell us, because you mentioned that you're kind of not a green thumb. So where did that idea come from, and then how did you do the research for that?
Oh yeah, it's funny because one of my good friends moved out of the area, and she gifted me her ficus, and it was like, okay, this beautiful tree. She goes, I left it outside. I've had it for 20 years. No one can kill this plant. Yeah,
no one but you.
Didn't know me well enough, apparently. And so it died. I tried to take care of it. I probably overloved it.
Yeah,
that's probably what I did.
I overwatered, right?
Overwatered, and like, oh, I'm gonna move it here. Is this a better spot? Yeah, so it died. And so I ended up replacing it with a fake standing plant. And that works for me.
Yeah,
it works for me.
It's hard to kill those.
Yeah, it really is.
It's really hard to kill those.
And how the plant kind of, I was going to say the idea germinated, but
yeah, there you go.
Hey, Julia,
yeah,
a pun for Julia's sake. But how the idea came to be was that I was moving my daughter into college, and that's how Julia's
right
point of view, that first scene really came into focus. But I didn't have her foil yet, and I knew I wanted to have a foil for her. I wanted to have a dual point of view.
Yes.
But I didn't have anyone that I considered interesting or worthy enough for her. And then I was interviewing for my day job a woman who had a partner who cloned carnivorous plants.
I love that.
And she was also pregnant. And so it was kind of like it just got into my subconscious,
right?
And then I ended up just going with it, and that's how it came to be. But of course I knew nothing,
right?
Nothing.
And you do, it's a really good research. I mean, I don't, it's very, you do just give us just enough to be really like, oh, that's I didn't know about that. And then but it seemed like you knew what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's because other people do.
Yes, that's how it works, right?
Yeah,
We
one
gotta,
of one of the non-spoilerly clues that you mentioned, there is a clue that is directly related to Julia's knowledge of plants.
yes.
And that one actually, I had like, hey, what if we did this? And I actually reached out to the partner of this
Oh yeah,
woman that I worked with,
yeah.
and asked, hey, how does this sound? And he goes, well, what if this instead? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so much better.
Yeah.
Because what I was thinking, like, okay, there's something. And
Right.
it was like, no, that doesn't
Right.
work.
It's about a plant getting bumped. And there's like
Yeah.
a very specific thing that happens to this type of plant, which is like,
Yeah.
and Julia notices it, which I found really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, that is exactly, and Julia is
Yeah.
the kind of person who would notice that.
Right.
One,
Right.
because of her love of plants, but also because of her background and her personal story, which you do a beautiful job of giving her the right motivations to be the kind of person that she is.
Yeah.
Right. It was her experiences was super tough. So I love the idea that in this, first of all, I love that there's two women here. There's two very strong women who are of course at odds because they have different agendas.
Yeah,
very different agendas. But these are two really, strong women. Did one of them emerge? I mean, so it sounds like Julia emerged for you first, and then Ren developed her. So it's sort of one of the themes of the book is about how sort of our past, violence in our past in particular, sort of, or in this book, in this case anyway, forms us. And is that something that sort of is something that you're thinking about as you're writing the book, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, it is. And I think, I mean, we work through our own, pasts, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the things that recurs, it also was in Blood Will Tell, is my relationship with my sister who's no longer with us.
I'm so sorry.
And just we had similar growing up stories, but we went in different directions. And that's kind of the thing that has always appealed to me to explore is, if people have similar, backstories, how do they turn into different people? And Julia and Ren are very, very different, but they both had past trauma.
Yeah.
They both have kind of complicated relationships with their families.
Yeah.
And so they kind of work through it in very, very different ways. They also both have an interest in plants. Julia's a botany professor.
Yeah.
And Ren kills people with poison.
Right.
So very, very different, but they both really appreciate botany and flowers and plants.
Yeah.
And so finding that common thread between them, and also how different it manifests based on who they are as people and how they've developed
and what their family, I mean,
yeah.
So Julia lost her parents, but Brennan lost her mom, and so it is we're gonna hear the vacuum now. We're in a hotel room, we're gonna they're vacuuming somewhere nearby. Well, okay, so we'll just ignore the vacuum, but to that point also I thought it was really interesting. These are both moms.
Yes.
I mean, it's sort of different. I mean, you're a mom, I'm a mom. We have actually similar aged kids, and that really I mean, that's a huge, that changes things. Now Julia already she already obviously has raised a daughter who's going to college, and Ren is just starting this journey. But there is something also very, from the moment you're pregnant, you and I both know this, there's something very sort of protective and about that baby. So is that something you also explore? This is my first Heather Chavez book. So is this something that you also explore?
I do. And I actually am often inspired by incidents that happen with my children.
Sure.
No Bad Deed started with, I was picking my daughter up from school, and we saw this attack on two boys jumped another boy right in front of us, and there was that whole, what do I do? My daughter's in the car, how do I keep her safe while also being a responsible, ethical human being? And while I was in that split second trying to make that decision, they scattered and it was over. But of course that stuck with me because it was all about, how do I keep my daughter safe? But these, I mean, when I'm talking boys, I'm talking they were maybe 13.
Yeah.
They weren't adults.
Right.
And so what is my responsibility to other people's children and my own, and my own safety, and also what does that look like? And then of course the thriller brain in me would pivot to what happened before that
Right,
moment.
right.
And because of course that always occurs to me as well. And then this one, before she finds me, like I said, moving my daughter into college, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I mean, she's so independent, but it's the first time she'll be a whole day's drive away from me.
Yeah.
And that was really traumatic. And but
Yeah.
also I was very excited and thrilled for her too.
Of course.
And so there was that whole launching. And I, of course, being my brain as a mom and a thriller writer.
Right. What's the scariest thing?
What's
right?
the scariest thing that
Totally.
can happen?
Worst case
Yeah.
scenario thinking, I call
Yeah.
that. I think that's so true.
Yeah.
Well, and it is, it is really
Yeah.
interesting because there is this sort of, there's this visceral reaction to watching, especially I think violence on on young people, that we then sort of like, it's like, we don't want to, obviously the priority is your own kid first, right? You have
Yeah.
to, that's what we all do. And that's understandable. But then of course, like, you're like, that's somebody's kid, and he's clearly, it's been violent against him. So yeah, it's a interesting push-pull. Like, there's no really, once you have a baby, there's no kind of separating yourself from that reality ever.
Yeah. No, I mean, my son's 25 and he's living in a different state, living his own life, fully adulted, and still like, oh, hope he's okay. How'd that test go?
Right.
So it never does end, and especially with the big issues and with the way our world can be.
Oh, that's exactly right.
And
Our
that's
world's hard.
It's hard, and some of what I was doing, I mean, obviously it is a thriller, but I also, there are always deeper issues in thrillers.
Yes.
And
well, the best ones. That's what I love about thrillers. I mean, and I like to think, I mean, of course I focus on women because it's killer women, but I do think that there's something, I think that's wonderful to read about things that feel really true to me, even though of course, I mean, none of this terrible stuff is happening to me, we should knock on some wood. Anyway, I'll find some, but it feels like it's just a really, those issues hit home, because we can all, I think the other thing that happens with motherhood is you start to have these like horrible scenarios in your brain about things that can go wrong, which I don't feel like I had them the same way before I had kids.
Yeah, no, it's different. I think, what's that saying about how it's like letting your heart live outside your body?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is, because you are so much more concerned about protecting that heart.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you have so much less control.
So much less
control.
So
it makes you crazy.
It makes you crazy.
And it does. It makes you crazy. And even though I'm very, I am pretty permissive as far as like trying to respect them as individuals and people, and let them live their lives and not the life I want for them.
Right.
And it's being that, striking that balance between guiding them but not overprotecting them, and also launching them but being a safe space for them. And so it's hard. It's hard, and especially in a world like, my daughter was living in LA by herself. I mean, not which she had a roommate, but and that was something that it was like, I'm so incredibly proud. She started a band. She's she is living her full life, and to let her do that, be that person, it's hard. It's hard as a parent, but it's also so exciting. To watch it.
Well, and I think that's probably at the very basic level, it's just feeling two really distinct emotions at the same time, right? It's like, unrelenting joy and unrelenting terror, kind of, right?
That's it. That's parenting.
That's parenting.
Welcome to our parenting
Exactly.
podcast.
I know. There you go. Seriously, we do talk a lot about children in this podcast. I don't know if that's me. But okay, so we were before we even started on air, we were talking a little bit about like some experience you had, and I wanted to talk about sort of your process. I know you talked about the fact that you're not somebody who has like a million ideas. Are you? Are you? There's the plotter, the pantser. Tell us a little bit about sort of how stories evolve for you?
I am firmly a plotter. I started out, trying to be more discovery writing, when I was in my 20s, and just kind of starting with an idea and running with it. And that didn't really work for me. I know it does work for a lot of people, didn't work for me at all. And I found throughout the process that the more outlining I did, the more comfortable I did writing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, and especially because I do like my books to be layered, and
Yeah.
so, and a lot of that does happen in editing, to be honest, but also I do like to have a roadmap, and like I compare it to like, okay, maybe I will go off and take a side street or detour, but I'll still end up in the same place. And like with Before She Finds Me, when I had the original idea, there were two parts that came to me almost instantaneously once all the pieces came together, and that was the opening and then the climax. And so it was like, okay, and how do we get from
Yeah, you have the bookends. Yeah, well, that's
yeah,
good, right?
yeah. And so that finding that path, like, okay, what, and especially because Ren is a different character than I've written.
Yeah.
In that she is a pregnant assassin and I am not.
Right.
So it was
What?
yeah,
You're not?
I know.
So
Oh,
crazy.
that'd be a great reveal.
Yeah.
And guess what?
I'm a pregnant assassin. And then the screen would have to go dark because I would probably have to die before this thing hit it.
I know, and oh no. But yeah, so it was exploring that other person who was not me was also very, very interesting. But yeah, no, I'm definitely a planner, and that doesn't mean I don't take detours. Like, for instance, in No Bad Deed, there's a minor character named Daryl and his accident-prone Labrador, who is, we're supposed to be in a scene. And they are in the book.
Yeah.
Because like, oh, I kind of want to live with Daryl unless they're a little bit longer.
Yes.
And so things do happen. I do allow myself that freedom of discovery, because I feel like even if I do character prep and do Enneagrams and all that things to explore them, I don't really know them until I see how they react.
Exactly. That's exactly it. I think that's how you get a really like authentic kind of character development is that way. But so then the other thing we were talking about is sort of like the ideas, like so tell us about that, because that, and then tell us about your experience, because that I think for people who are publishing or aspiring to be published, this is very real stuff that happens.
Oh yeah, it was I like to say that for book 1 I found my voice, book 2 I found my process, and book 3 I found my joy. And it's really, let's focus on that process. Because I think that's one thing that especially if you're an emerging writer and you have that first book and you can live with it as long as you want. You can set it aside for a year when your son is graduating, for instance,
as an
example. You don't have to lock yourself in the spare bedroom or on the dining room table or whatever. You have freedom of time and choice. And then all of a sudden book 2 is a whole nother animal. And it's like you all of a sudden have to really fine tune what does work for you. Are you a pantser? Are you a plotter? How much detail do you need? How much time do you have to explore versus, like with, maybe you don't have time to do 7 drafts. Maybe you only have time to do a few drafts.
Right.
Before you turn it into your editor, and then you'll do a few more.
True.
So with book 2, I actually wrote a completely different book, and then ended up submitting it, and then it was like, oh, I don't think this is where we want to go.
Can you imagine? You're like, oh, this is the only book I've written.
I know. And like you said, one idea at a time. And so when I talked to my editor and we decided to go in a different direction with the plot, we stayed with the central theme and the relationship of the sisters because that was important. But I think I logged like 28,000 steps that day, just because I'm like, I have to walk and force an idea. And forcing an idea, it did not happen in a day or 2 days or even a week. I do have an idea jar that's like a cookie jar with a T-Rex that I put because they don't come very often, like whether it's a name or a location or just a plot point,
Yeah.
I'll throw it in the cookie jar because I'm like, okay,
You might need this.
I'm definitely going to need this.
Was that something that developed after book 2?
It was during book 2.
Okay.
Yeah, it was during book 2 because all of a sudden I was like, okay, let me think of this. I have one idea and I embrace it passionately.
Yeah.
And so to come up with, another one was very challenging. I actually wrote a Writer's Digest article that starts with, I hope I say this, my, book 2 kicked my ass because it it did, just going through that process. But it was also so, in some ways, such a growth experience.
Yeah.
Because the worst that happened, hey, my editor doesn't love my book.
Right.
Happened.
Yeah.
And I knew
and you
that,
survived it.
And I survived it.
Yeah.
And I knew that, like I said, I found my process. I found what works for me and how to pivot.
Yeah.
And it was great. I think and then, like I said, then starting book 3, I knew what worked for me and what didn't.
Yeah.
I knew what I needed to do to find my joy.
Which is, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, I think that's, and there's so much that can happen that's unexpected in this business. And that's kind of the sort of like, that's about one of the worst, right? Is like, you're like, I feel really good about this book. And the editor says, this isn't really working for me. And you're like, wow, where do we go from here?
I know.
Yeah, but you did it.
I know. I did it. And that's the benefit of having also not only a very brilliant editorial agent, but also a very brilliant editorial editor.
Nice.
And with before she finds me, the having that sounding board and that relationship to like explore different facets to the characters and the story and layering. Like I love layering. My first drafts are just, I don't want to say they're a dumpster fire, but they're dumpster fire.
You just throw them all in there and then you like kind of call things out.
Yeah, there are parts that I do polish, but I learned that from book, well, like I said, it's a learning process, right? And I realized that even as much as I plot, I will change things. And so if I spend too much time polishing and editing something that I ultimately cut, I don't really have the time for that anymore. So my first drafts are generally built on plot. And then I go back and I layer in the emotions. And I do some of that in the first draft.
But you kind of like,
but I do kind of figure out like motivations and is this really how this person would do this, and does this make sense from and is a timeline working, and all the logistics of putting together a story, and figuring out which tangents I'm going to explore, where I'm going to veer off the outline.
Yeah, no, that makes I think it's like you said, there's a perfectionism that we can get to towards the end, but if you get to it too soon, you spend a lot of time perfecting something that may not make the final cut, right?
So I'm curious, do you underwrite or overwrite?
I'm a total overwriter.
See, I think that'd be so much easier.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I mean that is the idea. But then you oftentimes I need to cut 20,000 words.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm getting good at killing my darlings, but it's still hard. There's still stuff I think, well, I have to lose this whole line because there's just not room. So that is a problem. And I'd love to come in at like 85,000 words. And instead my first drafts are like always 110.
That's so funny because my first drafts are in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And then, regardless, I even went back because I'm doing a draft now.
Yeah.
Book 4. And I had to go back and I looked at my first drafts to say, well, this is feeling short. And then I'm looking like, yeah, that's because you write short first drafts. Heather. Yeah. That's how you work.
It works.
But it's funny because before she finds me in revisions, I was like, but it must have started higher because it at one time was 108.
Yeah.
Which is, and so
long.
I had to cut.
Right.
And you're right. That's hard too. It's hard.
It's all hard. Right. What's the easy part? The easy part? The easy part is when you get to like show off your beautiful cover.
Yes.
I love that.
And you get to go to Thriller Fest.
And you get to go to Thriller Fest with all your friends. And I love the smoke, like, or a little like that. This is a really beautiful cover. Actually, all of your covers are really fantastic. They do a great job. I love this. Okay. So you're drafting. So can you tell us anything about this? book in process?
Yeah, it's well, it's a standalone thriller again. And because it's a Heather Chavez book, it has 3 strong points of view. I don't know if there will stay 3.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe too much.
Right.
You know, this is, like I said, the dumpster fire draft. But it is set in the Sierra Nevada foothills during wildfire season.
Oh.
And so there are family secrets, and of course no one's being completely honest because it's a thriller.
Exactly.
That's what they do.
Exactly. So it has to be lies, deceit, betrayal, murder.
There's all of that.
There's all of that. And I love it. And actually that's a real thing. Like, you're in Santa Rosa. That's you guys deal with the fire stuff is scary.
Yeah, no, like I said, I do pull from everything to some degree.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, with Before She Finds Me, I used to live in Southern California. That's where I grew up. And my daughter, like I said, went there. And so I figured there wasn't enough market for a pregnant assassin where I live. So I went to, I'm sure Southern California is a big place.
Of course. There's definitely.
So I draw on my personal experiences. And with book 4, which is tentatively called Fire Book now, but we'll have.
But I'm guessing that covered that will not stay.
We are brainstorming titles now. Fire Book or Untitled. I mean, they're both really great.
They're great titles.
But it kind of was the book I've wanted to tell since Santa Rosa, where I live, was really hit hard by a wildfire in 2017.
Yeah,
the Tubbs fire, and we've had multiple scares. I mean, where I live, I've been evacuated. Not last year. So that was the first year in a while that I hadn't been evacuated, and so it's
so hard.
It's been this like, I've wanted to tell the story. And it's. But it's never been, I mentioned it a little bit in No Bad Deed because I'd finished the draft. And then suddenly, wow, these areas I mentioned were decimated by fire.
Yeah.
So I had to go back and kind of just tweak, but it did not touch really on the fire itself.
Yeah.
But for this book, I did want to explore that. Finally, I thought, okay, I have enough distance from it.
Yeah.
But it's also like drawing on what it was like in that moment.
And that's another vulnerability. Like, you have to really distance yourself from your possessions, which is something we're not that good at, especially as Americans, right? We're like, our home, our photo albums, or whatever. Right. It's really hard to be like, how do we...
It is.
I mean, you must have a list of things you take when you get ready to evacuate.
We actually have a fire closet by the front door. Yeah, because but we didn't in 2017.
Yeah,
that was the first year, and it was so funny what we all chose to take.
Yeah,
because my son had moved out by then. He was actually due to visit, and we had to okay, you can't come.
Yeah,
there's a fire, but with my daughter was still living at home, and it was me and my husband and my daughter, and so we each grabbed different things.
Of course.
And because it's the first time, my husband grabbed a basket of dirty laundry, because he figured these are the clothes he wears. He needed to be sure that he was clothed.
Yeah.
My daughter grabbed her favorite pair of jeans.
Yeah.
And her brother's football jersey. Because it's like, okay, that's what was in her moment, in that moment. And then of course I grabbed the photos and the passports and the birth certificates.
Smart. I think mom's got it. Dirty laundry is good, but let's be honest, we need.
So
so
it
is interesting.
Different, our different my daughter's was very much a sentimental reaction, and my husband's very practical, and mine was very these are irreplaceable documents. I need to make sure.
Yeah, so, that's right. Yeah. We had evacuated where I'm in Montana, and we also had a really big fire. I guess in 2019, and my husband was traveling, and my kids were both in college by then, so I did it by myself, and it was really overwhelming because in addition to that, I had dogs, so you have to figure out how to get the animals out, and it was and it all was fine, but I ended up loading up my car twice in this week-long period, and I was like, because you can't really haul that stuff around when you go to to the grocery store, but then you got to pack it back up again. Anyway, it came to nothing, but I appreciate having done that. I also appreciate the idea of a fire closet. That might be a thing, or at least a list. Here's your list if you're going to have to, because I mean, you didn't have very much time.
No, we didn't have that much time, and we were fortunate that we weren't right in, like, it stopped. I think it ended up burning like about a mile from our house. So close, but not.
But they can go fast.
This one went really, really fast.
Because the winds get going, and then it is. Yeah. So you're not talking about, like, you don't have like 5 hours. You've got like.
It happened very, very quickly, and you know, the some of the areas where that were affected, there's a road in and out, and you know, it's a challenge. You're getting everybody on that road at the same time,
right?
It was.
And you want to take all your cars because you want to get, you know.
That's what we've actually had that conversation. It's like, and now we've agreed. We're taking one car
just so you're all together.
Because the first time we all took our cars, and then we're thinking, boy, this is not helping. This is
right,
you know,
exactly. If everyone's going to get out, you need to have be in as few vehicles as possible. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, so it's well, Firebook. You guys, that's like the best title you've ever heard, or what?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually exciting. And so do we have a kind of ish pub date for that one? We
don't. We are because it's still being written, but it should be. I mean, the plan is to edit it this summer. I'm thinking it'll be next year.
Yeah. So 2024.
2024. I'm hoping. Yeah. I mean, it depends. I mean, yes, it always depends.
It always depends. Yeah. Everything always depends on and so much. So much. Well, that is really exciting. So look for Firebook, Heather Chavez in 2024. It will have a different title, but there'll probably be fire on it. The cover. I bet they did something fabulous with that.
They knocked it out of the park. And it's so funny because I had a visual of like the cover for Before She Finds Me, and I thought, oh, it's definitely gonna have plants on it. I mean, it's plants. There's a lot of plant imagery in it, but they went in this other direction, and I was like, this is why I don't design covers.
Exactly. This is why we have artists for this.
Truly, they were brilliant, and I would not have gone in that direction, and it's the exact right direction. Yeah, it's so symbolic.
And all of your books have these incredible colors. Like they just do such a fun job. So I do love this cover, and I got a coaster out of this, you guys. So you can be really jealous, but I bet if you follow Heather on all her socials and beg and plead, you too could get a coaster.
And I have extra.
It has a cocktail on the back, which we can go and make later. So that is super exciting. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. So we're at Thriller Fest, which means, I mean, I don't know about Heather because she seems more alert. I'm like, it's 11 o'clock in the morning and I'm still like sort of waking up.
You know, I'm always, it feels like I'm always tired.
Yeah.
Because I'm always tired. But I'm like, my body adjusts pretty quickly to the 3-hour time difference. Yeah. Because I woke up this morning at the normal time, and it's like, okay, it's 6:30. That's 3:30 back home. Yes. I've only been here like 36 hours.
That's impressive.
So, yeah. but I'm tired. Yeah. But I'm always tired.
Well, and also it's totally like we're not used to doing this much talking.
Right.
You know, I mean, at least I assume we're not, because I'm not at home.
No.
So.
Yeah, no.
So anyway, well, this has been so much fun to talk about Before She Finds Me, which is out June 27th. And I think our show, do I have this? Yeah, our show's coming out on June 27th. So as you are listening to this, Before She Finds Me is out in the world today. Go grab your copy. And thank you for joining me, Heather.
Thank you for having me.
This has been Killer Women with Heather Chavez, and we will see you next time. Bye.